Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, capital markets analyst and host of your Cannabis Business Podcast.
That's right. My guest today, let's bring him on. Kevin Schultz.
How you doing, Josh?
Good, man. With 357. Let me get my notes up here real quick. It's part of going live. So 357, tell us a little bit about what you're doing, transportation in the hemp and cannabis industry. Give us a little rundown.
Yes, we started the company back in 2019. Previous, I was in the cannabis industry for many years, helping scale some well-known multi-state operators. And when the hemp industry got the stamp of approval to transport product over state lines through the Farm Bill, I knew without fancy toys like tracking and tracing, and someone was going to have to really jump in that had the best interest of the industry in mind and grab the bull by the horn and develop those SOPs so the industry can rely on us. So that's our niche. We do that really well. And now we've grown into the international cannabis space as well.
Brilliant. I got my notes back. The joys of going live is sometimes when you click on your notes, then you click the X and it goes away. Not what I wanted, but here we are. So 357, Canna Logistics, a division of the 357 company that specializes in transportation, logistics of navigating the complexity of domestic and international shipping. So I'm kind of excited to talk about what that means, because for a lot of people, it's still kind of like in their little local bubble. But before we get to what makes it unique from, UPS or whatever, I thought we would bring in ChatGPT for a couple of slogans. So slogans for hemp and cannabis transportation and delivery company, according to ChatGPT, could be, here's your slogan. Tell me if you want to, take this on. You can't spell delivery without weed. Right?
No.
I think that's pretty funny, but I wouldn't take it. We'd rather bring it to you. I think if AI is picking up that, like, we'd be great together, it's probably overplayed, in my opinion.
I agree. Cute, though.
Yeah. And then get your green without leaving your scene.
Ooh, I like that for home delivery.
That's good. So let's talk about like what makes delivery unique. Again, like there's delivery out there, but a lot of people might not know if there's any nuances. So yeah, tell us a little, Kevin, about some of those unique transportation or logistics considerations that you have to kind of take into consideration when moving hemp and cannabis products.
Well, I think when most people think of delivery, they think of that final mile, the home delivery. And when is the cannabis space going to, develop that infrastructure? And I think you're starting to see some of the MSOs, here domestically think about that more than having patients or customers come to the store to cut down on some expenses. But with us, we cover that first mile, middle mile, and final mile as well. So I think when the supply chain, when the consumer thinks of it, they're thinking of that final mile. But what we try to educate the supply chain on is that we're kind of like that circulatory system for any industry, when it comes to logistics. And when we need to move biomass, let's say from the farmer to the processor, that's one leg of that journey of that product. And sometimes that biomass, gets converted into an oil that needs to go to, let's call it a co-packer. And, so there's various legs of transportation and logistics that we try to get the industry to think about. Early on, that was very hard to do. Folks had other things on their to-do list, like where are we going to get genetics and who's going to buy this raw material from us, which is understandable. But, we encourage folks to get ahead of these logistics conversations and really think bigger picture on how it's going to impact their business and ultimately total cost of doing business.
Yeah. Or just the experience of it. So case in point, I was a judge for a cannabis cup here in Washington State. And I was contacting other judges. I was doing flower and I contacted, concentrates and whoever else. So one of the concentrate judges had some hash, and this hash was just a big ball of nothing, And so when they found out who it was, they reached out and said, "Why did you send this hash in like this big mass?" And they said they didn't. It was beautifully laid out, but between the manufacturer who brought it in a cooler and then the people that were organizing the cup, giving it to the judges, it melted. You lose a lot of terpenes, for some of those full melt hashes at really low temperatures. Just the temperature of your car can change the consistency, flavor, all of that. Kind of like a bloom chocolate. If it melts, whatever, then you open it up, and you're like, what is this?
Mhm.
So when you talk about last mile deliveries and those kind of capabilities, is there any specialized equipment that you need or required, or is there safety or efficiency or anything that is different from anything else that we're used to?
I think it goes back to our familiarity with the plant. We're not like normal logistics companies that are trying to attempt to ship this commodity. So my personal, familiarity with being in the industry, we know how to ask those questions ahead of time. And even if the person that's scheduling us for the transportation isn't thinking about it, we're bringing those types of things to their attention. One of my partners has been doing cold chain transportation for a long time. I think it's very similar to special shipping any other type of specialty product that needs refrigeration or temperature control. So we're always thinking about those things. We take it extremely serious that we want that product to end up where it's going in the state that it was when we picked it up. But I think there's part of that game planning and in asking the right questions and preparing the shipper too as well, and providing introductions for that shipper to get the right packaging and the right way of shipping it, under control on their end before we even come and pick it up.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious if shipping has changed over the last couple of years. I've been trying to take my own survey, if you will, and ask about just in time delivery, or just what we knew about the transportation industry as a whole over the last few years as it kind of fell apart with the supply chain constraints. We see cannabis products that are delicate, can easily degrade during transport. You can see challenges for logistic companies that require special measures to ensure that products arrive in good condition, and the art of balancing that packaging, the costs, the weight, to ensure that there's right conditions set through the supply chain and prevent spoilage, and yet not cost too much where it doesn't make that business plan feasible.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about normalcy and just-in-time delivery and how things used to be, has COVID changed that? Or at least change the status quo of supply chain management strategy?
I think it's a good question. I think prior to COVID, everybody wanted everything, right away and for the least cost possible. And I think COVID, one thing it did bring, besides a few other things to the logistics industry, was a little bit more patience from the folks who were waiting for a delivery. I do think that's starting to go back to its original mindset a little bit more as Amazon starts to, really push things same day now. I think there's just some commodities that, to do it the right way, you may have to go a little slower. And I, especially in cannabis and hemp, I don't feel that there's anything fast and quick about it. I think it's got to be thoughtful. You got to make sure all your P's and Q's are crossed, and you're really paying attention to detail, because especially when we're going over state lines or going between countries, you want to minimize as many mistakes as possible, and get ahead of those. If you are going to anticipate, some challenges, trying to clear those up before you push play on the actual shipment. So, we always just do what we do. We're very thoughtful. We want to make sure that when we're shipping something, that consumer is able to do it, or that customer is able to do it again and again. This isn't just get it in once and whew, thank God it worked. We work with clients who are trying to scale businesses and want to be able to be, partner to them and make sure that this is reproducible for them. So hopefully that answered your question there.
Yeah, wondering if you're using technology to make that even easier, to kind of keep that on pace and repeated. Is there machine learning or artificial intelligence that you guys are helping with navigation, or any part of or aspect of that supply chain? Maybe you can kind of talk about big data analytics, how to optimize shipping or improve delivery or cost reductions, or any kind of competitive advantage that you have using technology.
Yeah, so we've developed our own proprietary technology that does a lot of what you just mentioned. And in addition to that, I'm a huge advocate for blockchain for tracking and tracing the life of these products. I think we really gotta, in order to get these Fortune 500 and Fortune 100 companies into the mix of, let's say, CBD, they're really going to want to know where the journey of this product's come from. And the only place I think that we could put that to, have one source of truth is on the blockchain here eventually. There are some companies that are starting to come to us and initiate those conversations. That would make our life a lot easier when it comes to the paperwork.
Can I just clarify blockchain? Because a lot of people associate that with crypto. So blockchain, just for those that don't know, is an automated Excel spreadsheet that just kind of keeps track of transactions. Essentially, that's
Correct.
a really simplified version of it, but has absolutely nothing to do with cryptocurrency. Go ahead,
Correct.
Kevin.
Thanks for clarifying that. It's basically a record of truth. So if you're buying, $100,000 worth of raw material from somebody in the cannabis or hemp supply chain, you're able to go all the way back to from when that product was a seed or a starter plant, and where that was grown, its entire life, how it was converted to the oil, and really that entire journey is documented and you can't tamper with it. So that would be extremely make our lives a lot easier. And I think it would encourage more general legalization at the federal level, especially here in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. And so there's no expiration of blockchains. It's transparent. It's immediate. All of those things. So for those who haven't checked it out, it's that's really kind of what's going to dominate the future price of some of those cryptocurrencies backed by that technology.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be interesting to see how that rolls out. And it'll be interesting to see how some new markets roll out as well. In terms of high demand that you're seeing for locations, I asked ChatGPT. I have my own idea, like Alaska and the Aleutian chains, and how difficult it would be to transport things to different villages and things in remote areas. But when I asked ChatGPT, what are some of the high demand areas, it mentioned population, economic activity, and transportation infrastructure with industry culture as its top priority. And so it listed the obvious being California, Texas, New York, Florida, Illinois, Massachusetts, and New Jersey.
Sounds like all big medical markets that came on board early on.
Yeah. Do you think that it's that not think, but where are you seeing some of that demand coming from? Is it traditional, markets, or is it the places like Alaska that I think of that need this?
For us on the hemp side, everything below 0.3%, THC, it's really a lot of where that biomass originated in. And that's where we're going in with our full truckloads and moving that biomass to a processor, which, some of the states that we tend to see that product go into, you did name, some you did not. You're thinking of Kentucky, Tennessee, Florida. I'd say probably close to half of the United states we've delivered into various different states of the product within the supply chain. So I think more when you're thinking cannabis, I think that's where the chat was going, busier states, intra transportation, where the AI might have been going on that one. But, really
it also mentioned remote and difficult areas. It did mention Alaska, Canada, or Australia. And then it said legalization. Wherever there's legalization, you're going to need it. So it mentioned Canada, Uruguay, South Africa, and some other states.
A couple of those countries you mentioned, we've delivered into. One thing that I think about as a potential bottleneck for the industry is those hard to get to areas. There's a lot of, especially on the industrial hemp side, those farmers really need to be within about 50 miles of that next part of the supply chain where they need to get that raw material to go before transportation costs are really starting to eat up your budget and your margins. So, those remote areas are although, they absolutely need transportation help, there's going to be tough to scale businesses in those areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could go back in time and use a trebuchet and try to just slingshot it to somebody, but the accuracy might not be there, although the cost reduction would. So you got to balance that out. So I asked ChatGPT what some funny slogans might be. You let me know if you want to adopt any of these, and we'll work it out with ChatGPT on what the royalties would be. It said, "Relax, we'll get it there." I think that's great. I think that's funny.
It's great, but I don't know if it works too well with the person who paid you to ship it.
Yeah, you're like, relax. It's going to get there. It's fine. It said, "From seed to sale, we handle the logistics." Again, like if AI is picking up from seed to sale, it's probably played out. I wouldn't recommend using it.
Played out, but it's definitely important.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it describes A to Z. It's that same thing. A to Z is played out too, but everybody uses it.
Right.
And then finally, slogans that ChatGPT came up with for hemp and cannabis transportation companies: fast, discreet, and highly reliable. It's got a sense of humor.
Cool stuff.
Yeah. Avoiding domestic arrest has got to be top on your priority, Kevin. Do you avoid Idaho entirely? I mean, we've seen compliance and regulations related to domestic cannabis transport and hemp. While there's been a lot of, set uniform laws in individual areas, hard to kind of track and follow. And then try telling a local cop in a neighboring state that your medical marijuana is medicine and see how long it takes you to get in handcuffs. You still have to avoid arrest and delays while shipping through or around Idaho. What do you guys do to ensure compliance with legal and regulatory requirements for transporting hemp or cannabis across state lines or even intrastate for cannabis? How does that work out? And international borders for that matter.
So early on, I'd say 2019 to 2020, Idaho was the big stay away from state. Although the Farm Bill is clear that we're able to bring, products less than 0.3% THC through their state, they were somebody that just wasn't worth dealing with. So we avoided it for a long time. We don't anymore. One thing our operations team is kind of obsessed with is making sure we're staying, abreast of all the potential nuances that each state is asking for. So a lot of folks are under the impression that the Farm Bill says I can do it, let's go. We quickly understood early on that each state might have their own ask of us. And we always want to make sure that we're in compliance with that. We always act as if we're sitting in front of a judge and stating our case, because, we want to make sure that everything we're doing is above board. We stay out of, and because of that, we stay out of a lot of gray areas that the supply chain does operate in. We're advocates for the industry. We're cheering for the industry. But when you're bringing product over state lines and it's in a gray area and drug trafficking is looking you right in the eye, we stay away from that. So we're always in the mindset of what's the best for the longevity of the industry. And that's just how we've always operated. I'll give you one early example. When we were talking with the state of Florida and having meetings early on, they wanted us to operate off a total THC formula. And they wanted us to stop at a checkpoint on the way in. And some states were still operating under Delta 9 only. And there wasn't any checkpoints. So, that's kind of what you get when you work with us, that knowledge that we've gained over the years and how to optimize those routes to, maintain, keep your costs down, but also keep you out of harm's way. And the last thing you want is, even if you are in the right, your product being, put in quarantine and spoiling potentially. So I want to make sure we mention, we do have hemp cargo insurance, which I think is something that's missing in the industry. And that does protect these loads when they're in transit. Gosh forbid something happens. Our customers are able to file a claim, and everything again is above board, and they're able to get reimbursed for the value of their product.
Normally insurance is so boring. But in this case, I find like crop loss insurance to be fascinating, and transportation of insurance, because, it wasn't that long ago that it was illegal. So, I mean, all of those things are at this point, like, really interesting. Derek wants to know about transportation needs. He's curious about driver compliance and what that looks like when hiring a carrier. Are you guys asset-based at 357, or are needs hired out to transportation companies?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So drivers have to be educated thoroughly prior, and we set the drivers up for success with some of our SOPs that we've developed. We do have one early on investor that is asset based, that if we have the opportunity to use his assets, we will. Over the years, we've trained a pretty extensive carrier network that knows how to do this type of commodity shipping, and we lean on that network quite a bit. But there is some extensive training that we put them through, with the documentation that they have to have on hand, and QR codes and whatever we can do to make sure that when they do get pulled over, that everything is perfect as possible.
Mm-hmm. And yet, so let's look at internationally and what will happen. We're looking at cannabis still illegal in a lot of countries. And even though it's legal in the US or regulated, There's strict regulations governing its production, distribution, and use, making it difficult to import or export cannabis products across borders and international lines as well. So when we look at international shipments of cannabis products, they're subject to scrutiny by customs, like you mentioned, border control officials who may seize or delay shipments, like you talked about, if they're even suspect or contain illegal substances. So that can create additional costs, obviously. And you mentioned, having insurance to facilitate that. What do you foresee, though, in the future? Do you foresee the ability to transport cannabis plants and product coast to coast across international lines freely without prosecution? Do you have a crystal ball for when that might happen? Are you hearing lobbyists talking about it? Because on the West Coast, California signed an international or interstate commerce. Oregon, I think, was the first, and it's on a bill in Washington State right now, where I'm at, making that potentially a whole West Coast transit line if the feds get out of the way. What do you see, and when? What are you hearing?
Well, I mean, I've heard the same things up in the Northwest, and that seems to be where everything gets started. I'm looking forward to that day. I think there's some there's some markets that could use that extra supply of product that tends to bulk up in those areas. I do think there's going to have to be some stamp of approval on the federal side for that to not be drug trafficking. So we'll probably stay away from that until there is more movement on the federal side. As far as the crystal ball goes, I've always said that one day we're going to wake up and it's all going to be over. You're going to be able to operate at the federal level, and it's legal. That being said, I look at markets that have different tracking and tracing systems already in place, and that's going to be super important for that day to come. So how does a state like Illinois share product with, a state like Oregon if they're on two different operating systems? So, that's just where my head's at. There's more than just saying, all right, go, it's federally legal. Tracking and tracing is extremely important in the industry when there's products above 0.3%. Country to country, it's really interesting. Over in the international market, it's really one word outside of the industrial hemp side of things. It's cannabis. It's either below 0.3 or it's above 0.3. And we're really starting to see an uptick in business there in those markets, and certain countries working with each other, more than others are. And some countries have agreements between medical licensors to be able to ship product back and forth to each other that is above 0.3% THC. So one prediction I do feel is that we're going to start to see some of the major players from the US, some of the MSOs, start to open up cultivation overseas somewhere, whether it's Costa Rica or Colombia, and start to get into those markets. That would be one guess I have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and looking at again the future of transportation and delivery, if what's your opinion, Kevin? If will low future commodity prices and high inflation make cannabis transportation services prohibitive?
As far as the cost to transport, I think when we were going,
we don't ship like really cheap stuff. I mean, I guess we ship cheap stuff from China, but it takes 3 months to get here. You know what I mean? When you have an expiration date, can you ship cheap things when gas prices are so high?
Well, I think you saw, the over the ocean prices during the peak of COVID, go 10x at times. The prices were, you couldn't absorb that as a business. Everything we're doing right now typically is through the airlines. So that's not a inexpensive way to ship things, but it is the quickest, and it's going to make sure that product isn't spoiling. So, I think there's a multitude of reasons why logistics prices go up or down. I think right now we're sitting in a good spot for price points. But those fluctuate. We've always operated under the mindset that no matter what the commodity is we're shipping, our margins are going to stay the same. So although there's a lot of extra work for us to ship the cannabis products and hemp products, we realize that this needs to be a long-term play for us, and the industry needs a partner that's not going to gouge them. So that's where our mindset's always been. And that's why we've been able to keep customers for quite a few years and ultimately grow based off referrals. So that's been cool.
Yeah. All right. I got a couple more slogans from ChatGPT you can choose from. Don't drive high. Let us bring the supply.
Ooh, I like that one.
Yeah, this next one is super creepy. From our van to your hand.
Ooh, that reminds me of Halloween as a kid.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's still creepy. Skip the trip, just hit our zip.
Ooh, weird.
Yeah, yeah. All right, that's AI for you. Um, so I've asked you a couple of times, like, what you think the future is going to be looking like for transportation, the expense, and I haven't heard anything about drones. So I'm
Mm.
curious about delivery innovation, efficient shipping, unconventional delivery methods like drones or emerging technology. Uh, Although a lot of the delivery technology has been pulled because some of those that were on the road were getting, people were kicking them, knocking them
Right.
over and stuff. Like, it's the same thing with some of the scooters they found like in the water, people just throwing them
Right.
in the lake or ocean or whatever, not really respecting the autonomous businesses. It's the reason why we don't have vending machines here, and in Japan they're proliferous everywhere. You could be hiking on Mount Fuji in the middle of nowhere, and next to a tree somewhere there's a vending machine.
Wow.
Like no one's going to. I don't know how they get electricity or power to it. It's magic, but nobody vandalizes it whatsoever. Having
Wow.
said that, what kind of technology in the U.S. would work? Are you guys looking at drones or what else?
The drones are interesting. I think there's a future for them. I think a lot of the reasons you just mentioned, they haven't caught on yet. I do think in logistics there is that human factor you're never going to get rid of. You need to be there for your customers. There needs to be a human on the other line, and in that responsiveness needs to be quick. Technology now, on the other hand, I think there was an explosion of freight tech companies, and that compiled a lot of data that made people make more actionable, have more actionable insights when they're making decisions. We took a little bit of a different approach when we started the company. We really wanted to listen to our customers, both on the carrier side and on the shipper side, and really understand the needs and service requirements, and build a technology that solved those needs that they expressed to us. So we went out and built those partnerships first and foremost, built a significant book of business, and then went and built our own proprietary technology that does a lot of automation and gets us smarter and quicker. But that was just the approach we decided to take. We thought that was more meaningful, and we're excited to really see that technology scale, and as the industries that we work in scale. We operate outside of hemp and cannabis as well. We're in what we call the general freight industry too, and work for major apparel companies and cosmetic companies and food box kits, and we're doing some other things, especially direct to the consumer. So technology is extremely important, especially in that last mile segment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So wrapping all of that up, how's the future of 357 going to look? We're looking at shipping. So I was looking at shipping companies as a whole, and figuring out like where you're going to fit into that. So when we're looking at shipping as one of the few sectors which is truly undervalued, yet operating at full capacity with rates at extremely attractive levels. So with all of the supply bottlenecks we've seen and port congestions that happen, rates and demand were high, kind of falling down now, but poised to bring in record amounts of revenue and innovation. So what are your thoughts, Kevin, about the shipping industry? Did we reach a peak? Are we going to reach a recession, and there's going to be consolidation over the next few years? Overall, where do you think the industry is going to go, and how are you strategically positioned to leverage whatever happens?
I think there's always going to be ebbs and flows in logistics. And for us, what we need to really worry about is how do we continue to bring that value to our partners? And there's a lot of complexity that we handle and take off the to-do list of both our carrier partners and our shippers. And if they can go back to working on their core business and maybe cutting some expenses on that end and becoming smarter in other areas, and know that their logistics is being handled and not only handled, but we provide multiple options for them. I think you started to see during COVID, shippers start to stop relying on UPS and FedEx as their only options, kind of going with that partner that was more local in certain markets and really understood those markets. And those are the kind of partners that we work with. And I think if we can continue to build those types of relationships, continue to add value to our customers, and really act as a business partner to them, I think we're going to be all right. There's things we needed to invest in, which was that proprietary technology to, stay at the forefront of tech. It's super important. I don't want to underestimate that. It helps keeps our costs down. It helps make our, customers, better at what they're doing and get things there quicker and more affordable for them. So I'm excited because I think we've built something special. And, as word gets out of who the 357 company is and we have more success stories, I think the growth could be, pretty good.
Mm-hmm. It'd be interesting to see what happens. All right. Well, I think with that, we're gonna have to roll this one up. Where can people find you at?
Yeah, you can call us always at 844-357-SHIP, 357company.com. You can reach out to us for just a conversation or an actual quote. I'll be speaking at NOCO at the end of the month, which is a big event for both hemp and cannabis. And then we're probably going to be out in Colombia in May as well. So reach out. You got a friend in the supply chain, and we're always there to start with the conversation and get an understanding for your needs and service requirements. So.
All right. I want to thank my guest, Kevin Schultz, president of 357 Company. But with that, I think we're out of here. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is The Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't. And I'm out.
Thanks, Josh.